Nation. Welcome to this episode of the Bo and Luke Show. I am your co-host, Bo Brabo. And unfortunately today, our other co-host, our rock star co-host, Luke Kerrigan, is not with us. He's out spending some really good family time, which we all need. So I give him a high five for doing that. But we have a super exciting guest with us. Her name is Susan Drumm. She's the founder of Meritage Leadership. She's a CEO advisor, a speaker, a USA Today best-selling author of the Leaders Playlist. We're going to get into the Leaders Playlist and find out what that's all about. She has coached billionaire CEOs, high-profile political figures, prominent Fortune 100 executive teams. And what's super interesting, I think, about Susan is the degrees that she has. I mean, you're talking Harvard Law School, Carnegie Mellon, London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. I really want to know how that ties into leadership. So, Susan, welcome to the Bo and Luke Show.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm excited because we love leadership. We love mindset. I'm going to just hit you with, I think, the biggest question that I have, and we'll go from there. Right. Based upon your background and your education, how did you get into the leadership development space? What drove you there? What's exciting about it? Kind of, introduce yourself for the audience and then kind of jump right into that answer and we'll just roll.
Absolutely. So yeah, I do have a pretty eclectic background because the acting actually happened 5 years after law school when I got a master's in acting.
Wow.
And so it definitely bears some explanation. But the thing is, it all comes together in leadership development and what I've been doing for the past 20 years. So I went to law school, did not end up practicing law, but I think I realized, oh, this is not going to be for me after my summers with various law firms. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I had all this loan debt too. And, but here's the thing, and it relates to mindset. What law teaches you is how to make finer and finer distinctions. And the use case of that is the applying it to case law, like which of these cases is most applicable, and that's how you make your arguments in your briefs. But I use that same skill that law school honed in making distinctions in mindset and how leaders think. So it is something I use. It's the skill set. It's just the application is a little bit different, the use case. And I went from there to Boston Consulting Group doing strategy consulting work and certainly understood how leadership has to also be melded with the strategy of the company as well, right? It's in service of what are the goals that we're really after, what's our bigger mission as a company, and how do we need to prepare our leaders to have the capability and capacity to generate those outcomes, right? So really clear there. But the other thing it taught me, that and also NBC, was some real differences between amazing leaders that I worked for and terrible leaders that I worked for, and how it colored my whole experience and psyche almost about what these are my early work experiences. And when I went on to do some of the work in Six Sigma at NBC television, I learned, like, you can have the greatest process in the world, but if the culture doesn't support it, you're dead in the water. And that was a lot of my experience there as well in the quality division, bringing a very manufacturing-based process into that world. And I was so fed up by 5 years into my work experience that I just wanted to do something I had some passion. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And that's when I went to when I went to drama school, because I knew I had a passion there. And it was through going there that I learned so much about myself, but also what I thought, like, wow, leaders could use some of the things I'm learning in acting, being authentic, connecting at a deep level, dealing with that inner critic, that voice inside your head, which as an actor, if you don't get some handle on that, you can't actually be fully present and in the moment and being able to be authentic, and then building the empathy of your character. And I kept thinking, God, there's got to be a way I could bring this back to business. And it was sort of the experience of that, as well as doing landmark education 22 some years ago, that was a personal growth journey for me. And I thought, this is the type of work I want to do, but for leaders in business. And that's how
Yeah.
I got started all those years ago. So each of those twists and turns of my background play into what I do today. And I
Hmm.
never would have thought that. People thought I was crazy. I mean, I thought I was crazy. Like, I couldn't find my footing
Yeah.
until then.
That's amazing. It's a fascinating journey, right? I think it's awesome. And I remember conversations I had years ago back in my army days with young troops, and they would ask me, they'd be like, how can I how can I do what you do? And I said, well, the first thing is you have to realize that I'm me, right? And you're you. So you're not going
Hmm.
to be me. You have to
Yeah.
who are you? Right? Spend some
Yeah.
time figuring out who you are as an individual for the authenticity, right?
Yes.
If you just try
Yes.
to mimic me, well,
Yeah.
now that might not work very well for you,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So in your development or as you're going through, but take some time to reflect initially on who you are.
Yeah. I
I can
think
always
some,
teach you tactics and teach you some
yeah.
the foundational type of stuff. But if you don't apply that to your own authentic self, you won't develop into the leader you're meant to be potentially.
Yes. I think there's so much pressure on some of the younger generations to figure out and specialize right away.
Yeah.
And there is such benefit in going broad first before you dive in. I tell this to my niece who's in her mid 20s, and she's like, I don't know really what I want to do. And I'm thinking, it's okay. Have
Hmm.
the experiences and you will figure it out, right? You will figure
Yeah.
it out. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Different experiences, I think, are key. The
Hmm.
more experiences that you have, and you'll eventually figure it out. I agree with that completely. I, next question, right? Along these lines, right, of people being developed. It's not uncommon in the workplace that people get promoted into leadership positions. And they've never been leaders before. And maybe they got promoted because of their performance, maybe their competence, they've been
Yeah.
performing real well on the job. So they get promoted. Now they're in a leadership position. Um, but there's not always formal leadership development for them when they make it to that level. And then the anxiety, the stress, all the intangibles are sitting on their shoulders and bubble up. And it may be a bad experience, and they may come across to their teams then as bad leaders, when in reality, they've never been a leader, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and it's kind of, I was just having this conversation with my wife last night, actually. So I thought, well, this is real good prep for this podcast, because it happens, and then people complain about that leader, but I see it as, well, I don't really think that's the person's fault, right? They weren't set up for success. Do you see that? And then how do you address that when you come across in a client workplace, if those types of things are taking place?
Oh, absolutely. See that all the time. Great individual contributor. And now it's a very different skill set. And, it's management that further more senior leadership that not giving them the tools that they need to be able to lead effectively. And that is a
Hmm.
different role. It requires a different mindset. It requires doing some inner work on yourself as well. And I think that that's the first journey of, what is it about how I show up? Because at the end of the day, leadership is just about relationships.
Hmm.
And it's about who you are, how you get things done or not through relationships.
Yeah.
And how do you inspire people? How do you delegate? All of these things are critically important to learn, and they're skills to learn.
Yeah. I think that's perfect. And you're 100% right. Um, we have a little quote that we use on our show, and it's relationships. Well, relationships are people, right? So I've broken that down for folks and say, well, leadership is about people, right? And it's the relationships. Management, management can be about tasks, right? All the tasks, everything that you manage
Yeah.
around the people that
Yeah.
you lead. So you may have someone who's a great manager, right? Maybe they can manage the heck out of a project, right? And keeping it on track and all the documentation that goes with it, and they can just really manage. But if they don't have the ability to lead the team, the people, then they could run into problems. Or you might need a separate leader, someone else, if your manager's really good at managing the project, but no one's influencing or leading or taking care of the people and influencing them and motivating them and giving them all the resources they need, blah, 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 right?
Exactly.
So
There's a
how do
great
folks, if they
phrase
don't,
that I
yeah,
use. Oh, I was going to say there's a great phrase I use that sums that up, which is managers manage actions, but leaders manage mindset.
there you go.
Because mindset drives action. So it's actually a higher leverage place with which to work. If you're just managing actions, that's a lot of efforting. But if you actually manage the way someone's approaching or their perspective and how they approach, then you don't actually have to manage their actions because actions just come naturally to them.
Yeah, that's so good. That right there, that's gold, because that is 100% true. So let's talk about mindset for a minute then. So in the whole mindset seems to have been a term or a topic that has really come into play. I don't know if it's the last 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's using the term mindset, and they want to say, oh, it's this kind of mindset, that kind of mindset, you name it, right?
I
And if
know.
you
I
read
know.
some
We're
science
dealing with
journals, it's
that for
like
25. Mindset's been around for like more than 25 years.
okay, so it's been around for a while, right?
Yeah.
But now I think with the advent of podcasts, like everybody's talking about it. Like at
Yeah,
some point you talk about it, right? I tried to keep it simple, and I was reading, I don't know if it's a scientific study or whatever, or from a psychology magazine, that the author was saying, listen, there's really only two mindsets from their perspective. You're either fixed or growth. Fixed mindset or growth mindset. What are your thoughts on that? And how are you seeing mindset play out in leadership development?
A mindset is just an assumption and belief that shapes what actions we see are possible. So I don't believe that they're just two. You can have a fixed mindset, and you can have a growth mindset, but I view mindset being much broader.
Mm-hmm.
It's a belief, right? Let's say the mindset is no one's hiring. That's a belief, an assumption. No one's hiring.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get a job this day. If you believe that, then there's only a certain set of actions that naturally occur to you. It's a little bit like the analogy is, in Microsoft Word, when you click on file, there's only a certain set of actions. You're in that mindset, right? But if you go up and switch your mindset, that's what I mean by a whole new set of actions occur to you. But there's another important piece about mindset that I think people it's sort of the second layer. We all have different mindsets about things. We hold assumptions and beliefs. And what we don't always see is that for every mindset, there is a price and a payoff. And in the work that we do in leadership development, we help people see what is the payoff you're getting, but what is the price you're paying for holding that mindset. And I will tell you that you're definitely getting a payoff or you wouldn't hold that mindset. Right?
I would agree with that.
Or you wouldn't hold it. You wouldn't have that sort of the way you view the world. And what people start to realize is that in this, every mindset's a price and payoff. It happens that most of the time that payoff is short-term in nature, but the price is long-term. And we're not always cognizant of the long-term price we pay for holding that mindset.
Yeah, I like that. That's really good. It reminds me, I have a book here on my desk. One of my favorite books I've read recently, and it was interesting. I don't know if you've ever heard it. The Magic of Thinking Big.
No.
I had never heard of it either. Somebody else referenced it on one of our podcasts.
Yeah.
And it's by a guy named David Schwartz, Dr. David Schwartz. I ordered a copy and I got it, and then I opened up to the front pages. My gosh, he wrote this in 1959.
Amazing.
Right? I'm like,
right?
This is not a new book. This has been around for decades. But he references some similar things, and about it, magic of thinking big is, how do you think? What do you believe? Right. And I think you're absolutely right. Because in taking this and even in my own work, I'm like, I do tend to think big and set objectives that are pretty high, right? For any business deals that my company is going after. And you're 100% right. There's a price for that. And it takes the prices, well, that payoff comes later because the bigger the deal, the more complexity there usually is, the longer it takes to
Yes.
close, right?
Yes.
So the
Yeah.
price is time. There's you nailed that. It's
Yeah.
price and payoff. And then when you get the payoff, the way you said that is perfect because yeah, you get the payoff, you're happy, you high five, you congratulate each other, you close the deal, whatever. But then you're still paying the price on another one you're working on, right? So it's very temporary.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating how that works.
Yeah. I think if you start looking at like, what are the beliefs I hold? And I think that's where, in discovering yourself, like what is your superpower? What
Hmm.
I've learned about myself over the years is I have this superpower of pattern recognition.
Hmm.
And it's really honestly, it's how I got into Harvard Law School because I took 8 practice tests and I could see the patterns and the types of questions they were asking. And so when I
Huh?
took it, I could anticipate what it was, and I only missed one question. So
Wow.
just an example, like I didn't really connect that, but where I bring that into leadership is the fact that we have sort of patterns of mindset or certain
Hmm.
patterns of the way we lead or the way we look at the world.
Okay.
And I help leaders see what that pattern is. And what I mean by that is you have a pattern of looking a certain direction and seeing the world. As human beings, we think we're chameleons and can see 360 degrees like a chameleon, but
Hmm.
we can't. We have a central vision and we have a peripheral vision. And where we point our focus of attention, that's what we see. But there's something behind our head we can't see, and that's our blind spot. And
Hmm.
so what I help leaders understand is this collection of mindsets that they have is about their pattern of where they tend to look. This is what they see, and they're really good at it. That's their superpower, right?
Yeah.
But there's something behind their head they can't see, and I help them understand what that blind spot is, who can best support them in that blind spot, and truly, and we can get into it more, but there's a model for leadership style, which is the Enneagram, that I find super powerful for people to see the types of patterns or mindsets that they're most drawn to and how that impacts their leadership.
Yeah. Talk more about that. What does that entail? Like how do you develop an Enneagram?
Yeah, so a little bit about the Enneagram. It is an ancient symbol of growth and development. So it is it gets lumped in with some other, let's say, personality profiling. It's very
Hmm.
different. So I hate when
Okay.
that happens, but let me make the distinction. Like Myers-Briggs or DISC, this
Yep.
is very, very different because it's an actual model for growth and development, and it describes the system with which we live in related to the others in the system.
Hmm.
So if I have, and what I say is when I work with teams on this, the best teams are cognitively diverse teams because, but they can also have the most conflict. So what it's showing is you're cognitively where you tend to look, what your pattern is, what that looks like. But if I'm arguing it's yellow, it's yellow, it's yellow, and you're arguing it's green, it's green, it's green, because someone else is looking in the model the exact opposite direction of my blind spot,
Hmm.
then we can come to loggerheads. But in working with this tool, people get to understand why that person tends to look this way, how that could benefit them, build some empathy, but also recognize that my growth path, as I mentioned, it's a model for growth and development. My
Hmm.
growth path is very clearly articulated by the model or symbol.
Hmm.
And it tends to be something called an arrow line, which are the lines in between that point in the exact opposite direction of the way I'm looking, as well as I have consultants in my life that can be helpful, which are my wing styles and the numbers on either side of me. And you really hit the nail on the head when you said, when people say, well, how can I be just like you?
Hmm.
And what I tell leaders is when they understand what their leadership style type is, they'll understand the path of growth for them. Because if someone's a different Enneagram type than you, they can't emulate they're not going to be successful.
Right.
They
That's
have to
yeah.
grow within their type, and helping them understand that is really what we do.
Amazing. Do you see that people's types, do they change over time?
No, they
Or
don't.
yeah,
Not in
that's interesting.
Enneagram theory. What happens is you become more highly integrated. So if you've done a lot of self-development work on yourself, you'll
Hmm.
start drawing in from other leadership types, but your core, which got formulated in childhood, will still always be there. It's just you won't be so rooted in personality structure. You'll
Yeah,
be more open, more integrated, and drawing from these other perspectives.
yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, man, that'd be so good to try that. I've been through several different not an Enneagram at any point in any of the formal leadership that I had been through.
Yeah.
Um, but that makes total sense where you don't change, your type doesn't change. I know even in the different exercises that I've been through in different organizations, every time I read it and like the outcome, and I'm like, yep, that's me, right?
Yeah.
You just don't. You're right. You don't change.
Yeah.
Um, but it definitely gives you multiple perspectives to go forward with.
Yeah. And by the way, I'll mention if listeners are interested in exploring this, we've built a little 4-session course that
Hmm.
will both assess you, but really give you the so what of it, like creating a development plan, how to
Yeah.
really understand what that pattern is, how to understand your blind spot. It's under enneagramapplied.com. That's where you would go. It's applying the Enneagram. But I also want to put a point of caution because no one owns the Enneagram, there are
Hmm.
many various tests out there, and
Ah.
many of them are inaccurate. The cheapy like
Hmm.
inaccurate. I've seen so many people mistype, and that's actually doing a disservice.
Sure.
It does not help you because then you're on the wrong growth path. Like,
Yeah. Now you're on the wrong path,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And
Yeah.
the reason this happens is because the Enneagram is a much deeper level test. It's looking at what drives you and what motivates you. So if you
Hmm.
can think of the analogy of an iceberg. Behavior is what we see above the waterline. That's where a lot of these other tests like Myers-Briggs and stuff play. They're
Hmm.
looking at behavior. But this isn't answering the question what you do. It's answering the question why you do it. So
Hmm.
it's much harder to type and it's below the water surface, like what's really driving you underneath. And
Hmm.
it's much harder to type. So a simple little test is not giving you the richness of what is truly possible with this tool. And then it also doesn't usually give you the so what of it. And this is what matters. Otherwise it just becomes like, oh, cool, you're this and I'm that. And so what? Like, so what? you know?
Yeah, the so
Um,
what is probably the most important part,
it is,
right?
it
For you
is.
to do anything with, right?
Right.
It's like I
That's
got
why
to
we
know
say this
why the so what.
Enneagram applied. Like, let's give you the so what, let's give you the path forward to be able to help you on your own growth and development journey.
And that's something that anybody can grab
Yes,
and
absolutely.
and,
Yeah.
and do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really cool. We'll have to check that out. We'll make sure that that goes out too, because that's I think that's amazing. Which was a question we were talking about before we hit the record button. When people walk into or they're in an organization and there's no um, let's say there's no committed leadership development, if you will.
Yeah.
Maybe they're in an organization where we talk leadership development. We bring someone in to speak to us for a few hours, a couple times a year, or something like that, right? There's no real formal commitment to leadership
Yeah.
development. What do you recommend folks do from a personal perspective? How do they go out there and find the right resources that are actually going to help them better themselves so they lead better inside that organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two things. You want to build awareness about what your pattern is and where you tend to look, particularly also your pattern under stress.
Mm.
You want to look at what that is, and then you want to create for yourself a development plan of how you're going to work on those in shifting and broadening and helping you. And that's essentially what the Enneagram applied course is for. So that's a great example of a way you
Yeah.
could do with that. It is about building awareness. There are other ways where you can do we have this as part of the course as well, but I like to do like a little mini 360. Have you ever heard of a
Hmm.
360? So
Yeah, I've
it's
done 360.
getting feedback. Yeah, it's getting
Yeah.
feedback from those who know you best about how you show up in the world. Because
Yeah.
again, we can't see everything. We only see what's in our direct line of sight.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the 360s. And I would
Yeah.
always chuckle at them because I would get back. It would happen anytime I've ever done one. And those above superiors that are part of the 360, right? They would always say stuff like, Bo doesn't necessarily pay attention to, senior leadership or to me, right? But he's definitely always focused on like the people. And I'm like applauding myself, like giving my,
Right,
a
right, right.
pat on the back because I'm like, well, I always thought, well, that's actually a good comment because I do care about the people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the 360s they're interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in session 3 of this Enneagram Applied, we have you do a little mini 360 to
Hmm.
validate what the report said for you.
Ah,
Because you probably will have questions and you'll probably want to ask people who know you best, is this what happens to me or how I
yeah.
show up?
Yep.
And getting that feedback is so valuable. You don't have to get the feedback, but everyone
Yeah.
that leans in and gets it,
Yep.
it's just data, so you can do with it what you want. But
Yep.
again, it starts to look at the idea of the blind spot.
Yep. I think one of the most fun exercises I went through, I was going through my MBA program at University of Michigan, Ross School of Business. And it was actually something that the dean of the business school came in and talked to the class, and he gave us the assignment. And it was sending an email, right? So this is not like in your workplace. This is outside of your workplace, to friends, to family members, um, and just ask them to give you or to write back. I think it was like 5 or 10 times from their mind, from their vision, from their viewpoint, when they saw you at your best, what they
Yeah.
thought was you at your best,
Yeah.
right?
Great. I
You
love
want to
that
talk
question.
about eye opening,
Yeah.
right? It's like stuff you may have. I remember reading stuff like, yeah, I didn't remember that. It's not something I would have picked off the top of my head. But it's like one more thing to put in your development toolbox
Right.
to get an understanding of maybe how others are viewing the people who don't work for you, people who
Yeah.
aren't on your team, but they're people in your life,
Yeah. Right.
and what they have seen. Just help elevate even further on your own growth path.
For
Um,
sure. For sure.
yeah,
It's really it's just, you have to remind yourself, it's just their perception.
right,
It's not the truth, but you also don't have the truth either. It's a combination
right,
of all of that, right?
yeah, right. Which I think exemplifies that leadership development is a serious thing, um, and it takes time. Takes
Yeah.
time to develop and commitment. So there was another aspect of pattern recognition. Can you touch on the leaders playlist and
Yes.
what that
Yeah.
is?
Yeah. It's about how to unleash the power of music and
Hmm.
neuroscience to transform your leadership and your life. And so the work, what I've noticed always is the patterns that leaders have. And I go through 9 examples of leaders who have what I call a playlist running in their life, right?
Hmm.
It's sort of, and I use that term playlist both figuratively and literally.
Okay.
It's a vibration, it's a belief system that they end up putting out into the world. And
Hmm.
what gets returned to them mirrors that belief. It's sort of like, you're going to believe this? Well, here you go. We're going to give you that circumstance. And so what there's a piece of learning that the way you show up as a leader has its roots in your childhood. It's
Mm-hmm.
survival strategies and how you relate to power that ultimately fuels the way you lead today. And you don't have to go all the way back to your childhood to understand this, because we can work with what's happening today, but recognize that the roots start in your childhood. So that's one of the first premises of the book. And the second premise is the fact that music is one of the fastest ways to shift our perspective, to shift pattern, to shift state.
Mm.
Music has the impact of lighting up all four regions of the brain at once,
Hmm.
and it allows new neural pathways to form more quickly. And almost like a fertilizer, they will, if you want to make a change in your life, you pair that with music
Hmm.
based on the essentially the vibration that you're looking to create, you can make that change more quickly. So I bring in all
Amazing.
sorts of research and studies around music's impact on the brain, and then give examples of leaders who had an old playlist running, what that looked
Hmm.
like, and what they shifted it to, what their new playlist was, and actually give you an example playlist of what they used so people can build their own. And then there's a
Amazing.
7-step process in chapter 12 of so that you can go through that process yourself.
Wow. That's fascinating. Luke and I interviewed the chief admin officer at Carilion Clinic, big hospital system in Virginia, and we did the interview in person in their conference room. And one of the questions that we asked her, and this is for our other podcast, um, how does she decompress? Right? There's so much going on, and
Hmm.
especially across a large hospital system. Um, but she seemed so calm, right? And her thing was music. And she said, "Listen, people probably see me out on the road, like, and they might just happen to see somebody with the music blaring, and I'm just like singing at the top of my lungs, right, to that music."
Yeah.
But it sounds like she's, whether she knows she's doing it or not, right, officially,
Yeah.
it really is having a neurological impact and helping
Absolutely.
her either decompress whatever her playlist is,
Yes.
separate from the day,
Yeah.
whatever she's looking for in that moment. It's having a real neurological effect on her.
Yeah.
That's
Here's
fascinating.
the way to think about it. Everything on the earth vibrates. The earth has
Hmm.
a vibration. Depending on the density of the vibration is how dense things are, right?
Hmm.
But emotions also have vibrations. They can measure them. They can measure them 3 feet off your body
Yeah.
through the electromagnetic signal of the heart, which is the largest electromagnetic signal that can be measured 3 feet off your body. And at the same way that your emotions have certain vibrations, so does music.
Hmm.
Music is vibrational. Music is pre-language. It's one of the oldest things that we have as human beings. And so, look, we already know that music can shift our state because that's why we use it to work out. What
Yeah.
I'm suggesting is we can use music both to tap into patterns that no longer serve us and interrupt old patterns, because I talk about the sort of pattern interrupter song in the book, as well as build new patterns, new neural pathways more quickly for who we want to be and how we
Hmm.
want to show up in the world, and use music to accelerate that uh, pattern disruption and new
Hmm.
pattern formation.
That's powerful. Thank you for sharing. I think that's awesome. So everybody, that's in your book?
Yes, in the
Yeah.
leaders playlist.
The
Yes.
Leaders Playlist. Everybody, you got to order a copy of the Leaders Playlist for sure. You got to do it. Take your leadership development in your own hands and get after it. Excellent. Well, Susan, we always give our guests, an opportunity to give shout outs, tell people happy birthday, whatever you want to do. The last few minutes of the episode. So right now it's the Susan Drumm Show. So take it away.
Oh, wow. Well, I would. My hero is my mother, and she is today going in for some surgery because she uh, broke her hip last night.
Mm,
So I am just wanting to send healing energy and love. And if any of the listeners out there, my mother is the most extraordinary woman. She's 89 years old, and she's my hero. And yeah, she's amazing. So the more better healing energy that anyone can send Marilyn Wempa, that would be lovely.
awesome. Do it, folks. Send your energy, your prayers, your thoughts to Susan's mom. Super, super important. So with that, everybody, you've been listening to Susan Drumm. She's the founder of Meritage Leadership. Go check out her book. Check out enneagramapplied.com. Take action today. With that.